I
I'm
love it. It's magic.
It's magic how this works. And you are a co-host, so you can just log
Ooh,
people on and off. You can just make the magic happen.
I can still hear
amazing.
you.
But
Can you still hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll be quiet.
you're
okay.
amazing.
So I am Lauren Van Hamert, as all of you I hope know, but welcome to any new folks to RDU on stage right now. We should be live. I see us, Miss Johanna, and I am here with the nonstop, I feel like we're nonstop right now, executive director of our Women's Theater Festival, Johanna Maynard Edwards. How are you?
Well, I am good. How are you? It's
Good,
oh.
good. Just hanging in there. But so before we jump on and you start your chat with the amazing playwright Audrey Cefaly and her dramaturg Carolyn Messina, let's talk for a second about once people hear about this awesome play, everybody's going to want to hear you guys read it. So tell us where we can watch it tomorrow night.
So tomorrow night, we're doing our 7th and final for now virtual plays WTF installment. And it's this brilliant, beautiful, wonderful play, Alabaster. And you can watch that on Twitch. And I'm sure Lauren will share all the links that show you how to go to twitch.tv/W Theater Festival NC. And you can just put that into your browser and like magic will pop up at 7:30 and do a stage reading.
I will share the link in the comments section of the RDU on Stage website. And what I will say is if you guys are watching and you have any questions or comments for Audrey or Carolyn or Johanna at all during this chat, you have to be watching on the RDU on Stage Facebook page and put the comments there because I'm not monitoring everyone's personal pages. So I'll be monitoring the chat or the comments and questions, and I will feed them to you guys. Johanna, what else does WTF have coming up?
Well, Lauren, we are after this week, we'll keep our Twitch going a little bit with some takeovers. We have one with Seed Art Share in May. We'll be finishing up the Triangle Bake Off plays and some other things. But our focus as an organization will switch to Freak Show by Carson Kreitzer. It was supposed to be our final show of this 2019-2020 season, and we have pivoted and turned it into a fully virtual production, and they have just started rehearsals. And what the design team, the actors, and all of the creatives and tech gurus are coming up with there is amazing and will delight and inspire folks. So the ticket links for that will go up soon. We'll be streaming those live performances on Vimeo Premium. And then in July, we're taking the festival virtual as well. We didn't want to wait and risk things. And our festival, Lauren, you know, people who come from far away are like theater people and also in the academia world. And it's, you know, it's unpredictable for them to know if they can travel or not at that time. So we thought, why not just capitalize on all the software and platforms we're invested in right now. So during the month of July, we'll do the festival. During the week, we'll have all the conference sessions. I've been calling it Virtual Theater Summer Camp for Grownups. On Fridays, we're going to have Festival Fridays that'll have the special convenings and keynote addresses and virtual happy hours. And then Saturdays will be filled with fringe shows. And we just launched a new call for submissions if people have ideas for fringe shows or for conference sessions that are particularly engaging in the virtual format. So that's what we're doing.
Wow. And your mom on top of that, and
Huh?
hunker down
Mm-hmm.
with your son and your husband at home. So,
Mm-hmm. And our
wow,
cats, 3 cats.
and you're a busy gal.
Yeah.
But it sounds great. I'm excited about the festival this year.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways it's really accessible and you can take it in the bite-sized chunks that you need to. And we've reformatted in a way that the presenters are going to get a percentage of the registrations for their sessions, and we're gonna 50-50 split the donations that come in for fringe shows. So it's an opportunity for presenters and producers to put something together and make a little bit of money this time. Usually when you go to a conference and you're a presenter, you still have to pay a rate, you still have to pay to be there and everything, but this is just a different beast, and everyone needs to make a little something. So I keep trying to think of ways to help people make a little something, even if it's not a lot.
It's a new model. I like it.
Yeah.
Very well. Do you want to introduce your guests this evening?
Okay, yes, I'm so excited. So tonight I am beyond thrilled to be talking to Audrey Cefaly. She is, in my humble opinion, one of the greatest living playwrights. She is a treasure, and her work comforts, astounds, and makes people feel
how they feel, sad, cry.
Yeah, all the things. And she is bringing with her this evening Carolyn Messina, her creative partner, who is her dramaturg. And what, dear viewers, I'm so excited to talk about with the two of them is what that's like, how a playwright and a dramaturg do what they do together, and what that alchemy is. So
I love that. Well, I am going to pop off. We will turn Carolyn's camera on so we can see her. And
All right.
I will see you guys at the end. And if you have any questions or comments, if you're just joining us for Audrey, Carolyn, or Johannah, type them in the RDU on Stage Facebook comment area, and I will make sure these guys get them. Have fun.
thank you, Lauren.
Bye.
Well, hi.
Hello.
Hey.
It's really great to get this opportunity to chit chat. Carolyn, you have a sun-kissed California glow, like you are just living
like
outside
Southern
and
Alabama.
loving life. Yes. So let's talk about Alabama.
Yeah.
So Carolyn told me when we were getting set up that you two have known each other since you were 14.
Yeah. She was her mom was a client of my mother's, and while they were talking, my mother said, you have to, there's a girl coming, and can you just keep her busy? And I was like, I don't want to do that. And I fell in love with her instantly, because she's so, well, I know she probably gets so tired of people saying this, but she's very funny. And she has a lot of bold ideas, and she has never, ever gone the safe way. She's always, well, that's not entirely true. I mean, creatively. Ironically, Carolyn is really kind of a rule follower when it comes to like doing the right thing and taking care of family and, in her work life and stuff. But creatively, she's just really off the charts with the ideas, which is why I keep her around, because that's what you need in collaboration. But before
I also thought it was because I'm one of the people that's up at 3:30 in the morning when you're doing some of your best writing.
Yeah, that's but we've had many a trip down to the Gulf together, and I've got the naked pictures to prove it. And not like that. Just her, like, walking through the condo. And, we graduated together, and she sort of went her own way and I went my own way. And then about, I don't know, so 5 or 10 years after that, we started collaborating, and we've done a lot of really cool stuff together. And she's also an incredible actor. Just, another reason I keep her around. Did I miss anything, Carolyn?
I do, baby, you did better than I ever would. Love you. Thank you. Yes.
So, Audrey, how did you become, so I'm going to tie the threads together. Audrey, what was your path to playwriterness? And then Carolyn, what was your path to being a dramaturg and amazing actor? And where did you guys come back together?
She and I were both performance majors, and so selfishly, I was looking for plays that I could perform, especially short plays. There was a particular time when I was in a certain zone, and I had a collaborator, dear friend named Erica Imhoff, who was actually, truthfully, she was my very first dramaturg, because I wrote a play, a short play, and I said, "What do you think of this?" And she goes, "Well, I think it needs this. I think it's got too much of this. What do you think about this?" And so she helped dramaturgically with my, my first 2 short plays. And the issue was that I just did not have, I couldn't find plays out there that were deep enough where I wanted to go creatively. And so I was like, well, what if I'll just try to write one. And so that's where it all started. And I specialized in the two-handers. I still do much specialize in the two-handers for years. And eventually, Carolyn and I took one of my short pieces to the Samuel French Festival, and it won, or it placed in the top, in the winner's circle, and I got published for all my original short pieces. So that's kind of how it started. And a lot of those very first pieces that I wrote would become, full lengths over the course of the next decade or two. So that's how it started, I think.
The little seedlings. That was when Audrey was acting as well, too. Way back in the way back day, Audrey was acting as well. So we actually did Finn and Yuba in New York first. Wait, what was that? I was trying to remember. 2008, I guess.
Something.
Yeah. And then just started clicking from there.
Yeah, that was because I'd said to her I might want to change a few things, and she and I'd sort of been out of touch, and so that was our first collaboration when she and I went to the Strawberry One-Act Festival together in New York. And incredibly, Carolyn she's a librarian's daughter. Hey Jude, I hope you're feeling better. And there's something about Carolyn in her that she's very a big stickler for details, and especially when it comes to Southern content.
Mm-hmm.
And you could argue that
sometimes to a fault.
Way more, yeah, sometimes to a fault. Carolyn is way more a stickler. Well, let me not say that. I think we're both stickler for details in different ways, but Carolyn is way more on the pulse of like Southern culture, Alabama culture, blue collar culture. Her background and her need to want to research. Like, she's really good with the research, like boots on the ground research. I'm like, we need a bar. We need the perfect bar for the Gulf.
And I'll find it.
Bar. And she will get in her car and go find it. I need like the perfect watering hole, and she will make 50 phone calls and then get in the car and go and see it and take pictures. Like, so
that's awesome.
Yeah, and she's just as instrumental in the rehearsal room too, and during workshops and things. We've pulled many an all-nighter.
Yes, we have.
She's indispensable. She really is. If you're a Southern writer, as far as I'm concerned, you need to be working with Carolyn, because she's I don't think there's anybody better out there.
Yes.
Carolyn.
The answer is yes.
That's high praise.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Also, Carolyn.
Isn't one of your questions about goats? You'll see by the end of this conversation.
Oh, I can't. Oh, I can't wait to know about the goats. Carolyn, I'm going to have to introduce you to my mother-in-law. She's a historian of our little town.
Oh, too. Yeah. That would be fun.
People still knock on her door and ask her.
Oh.
People who's buried in that cemetery and so forth. So yeah, she knows all the genealogy of our little
I think that's
area.
I think that's great. That's so fascinating to me. That's really, I do it because we start jamming together, and suddenly I'm compelled to do it. Sometimes even when Audrey might want me to do less of it, but it's exciting, and I do think it's important. One thing I think is so great, one of the many, and that I think is so great about our plays is that even when it's a fictional town, it's so specific. The sense of time, place, the tone is these characters is so specific, so fleshed out that I think it makes a big difference. I think people feel that as opposed to what might have been almost a falseness. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense.
I just think it takes it that deeper level.
Well, that's what you're so good at, Carolyn, is taking us to that deeper level, because you understand Alabama at a much deeper micro level than I do, because I didn't grow up in a home with a lot of the traditions that you did. My mother likes to cook her green beans al dente. She was born in California. Yes, she's Southern, and my dad is definitely Southern, but I don't think I had the same rituals. Like in my family, we're eating green beans almondine. I would have to go to school or someplace to get the green beans that most people in this, it was like forever before I ever tried my first green peanut. Like, and someone here was like, you don't know what a crepe myrtle is? Aren't you from the South? And I was like, well, I grew up there, but I never gardened there, And
Right.
I'm like, not that I feel like a fraud, but it's something like that where Carolyn keeps me grounded, honest, yes, but it's more than that. She brings us to that. She brings that in, and then we're in that whole gooey, like delicious
new crop of purple hulls.
Yeah, right.
And we'll jam, and she gets so incredibly specific. Sometimes it can be painful because it may jar with another problem that I have, and they're at odds with each other. But I would say, maybe those are the best kinds of arguments to have. Like, you have someone fighting for the authenticity and another person say, yes, but I have to achieve this also. So how can we meet in the middle? Famously, we had a conversation about what was funnier, pie or casserole. And I probably even shouldn't have mentioned it because she could go off at any minute. I love you. But
casserole is serious.
What'd you say?
Casserole is serious.
Casserole has 3 syllables. If we have time. Casserole has 3 syllables, but pie, it's pie. Okay, pie, it's pie. Anyway, the issue is that sometimes she has so much research and so much information. It's good to bring it all in like a haul from some store, and you're like, you got 30 dresses, but you don't know which one. And having all of that, I was talking to Eric Pfeffinger, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, earlier today, and liken it to like, you got to pile all the sand, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're not always writing a play from the beginning to the end. Sometimes you're starting in the very middle, and you're like, who are these people, and what made this moment occur? And so you just sort of like start gathering everything and living in that world, and you never know what's going to get left in and what's going to get put out, or what's going to translate into something else. Like there have been many times where I remember in Finn and you, no, it was in the Gulf. There's a line in the Gulf where I had a character eat a piece of cheese, and then she says, I'm immune to you and all of your mean-spirited mental terroristics. And was it you, Carolyn, that said, no, you've got that backwards? Kryptonite doesn't, she calls it her kryptonite. And then I realized, no, you don't want to eat your own kryptonite. Kryptonite is your enemy. It kills you. And I was like, oh, well, we'll just do it we'll just have her do it. And then a few minutes later, Kendra goes, that's your kryptonite? You're ingesting your own kryptonite? Okay, just check it.
I don't know if that was me. I'm not sure I was that clever. I probably would have caught it afterwards, but I'm not sure that was me. That's been a while. I think it's cool what you were saying too, though, or you kind of touched on, is the way that you write, which I think from the very get-go, early on with the Finn and Yuba, is that you have that structure where you write backwards to forwards. You write in an opposite style, and that's kind of evolved. And then you split it wide open with the last wide open, but that's sort of evolved as you've written. So you definitely have a certain style, and now you've created this certain vocabulary, and a lot of folks are tuning in on that too.
Well, I just want people to understand that you don't have to have, I've never taken a playwriting class. I've only ever taken one theater class. I did produce a Meisner weekend intensive, but I don't think that counts. I want people to know, and when I lecture, I tell them, I say, there's a lot of people out there telling you that you have to write about something. And that to me can be intimidating if you're a new writer. Well, what do I have to write about? Right. And I've never written a play anyway. And so not only do I have to write my first play, but it has to be about something. It has to be important. And I don't think that that's what teachers mean when they say that. And I wish that they would say what they mean. I think what they mean when they say that is that make your story matter by not buying into your own bullshit and your own thin, flimsy writing. George Saunders talks about the ability to see your characters as you would a loved one, like a precious grandmother or a spouse, right? If you really care about the story and you really care about getting honest and close to your characters and making it a story that people care about, then you have to be honest with your characters and you have to love them enough to say, hey, Bob, I see that you're struggling. How can I love you today? And the character will tell you what's going on. They'll say, well, I'm hurting. Well, why are you hurting? Well, I'm hurting because this. Well, how did that happen? And really get honest. He calls editing a form of active love. And because just like if you're talking to your child and you say, what's going on, buddy? What's going on? Are you having and if you let your characters release from your intentionality of what you think this character is and let them be what they need to be, they will, as George put it, show you their full expansiveness. They will become what they need to be, but you have to be honest about it and care more about your syllables than about any kind of intentionality that you bring. And so it almost seems as if those two things are at odds with each other, right? You have to write about something, but at the same time, you don't want to bring your intentionality to the story, because in doing that, you automatically box yourself in almost from jump. And I don't think that is anything that's going to put you, in a confined area, because you're like, well, I'm writing a play about climate change. And there's a character named Bob, and Bob is, an activist. Okay, that's a lot of hard choices really early on.
Yeah,
and
you've fenced yourself in.
You've already closed yourself off to the idea that maybe it's not about climate change. Maybe it's climate change adjacent. Maybe, maybe it's not climate change at all. And maybe if you get far enough in it, you realize, this isn't my climate change play. This play wants to be this, and you got to get to a point where you don't care about the play's feelings, because the play doesn't care about your feelings. The characters in the play, they don't. They want to be The play wants to be the play. The play wants to work. The play needs to work if you want people to care about it. And so if we say, well, that's true, that the play needs to work, then you cannot hold on to any of your words or syllables. You have to be willing to cut anything. And that is a hard thing to wrap your brain around, that you've spent 6 days writing these 15 pages.
Yeah.
And you come to the realization that it would be so much stronger if you just remove those 15 pages. Well, they're not gone. They're not going anywhere. And there's probably something in those 15 pages that you can repurpose in some way. So it's almost like coming to terms with the idea that you're writing all this stuff, but none of it is so precious to you that you can't release it to be what it really wants to be. Sometimes what it wants to be is in the trash can. Sometimes it wants to be another play.
Yeah.
Sometimes it wants to be in act 1. You're lucky if you get that. You're lucky if you're like, yeah, these 15 pages, they're great, but they need to be in act 1 or act 2. And what's challenging, I think, for me, and you didn't ask me this, but I think what's challenging lately is there's so much disruptive theater out there, theater that's designed to like cause a reaction and stuff. I used to think that, this is going to sound a little negative, Nancy, but I used to think that plays were supposed to care about the stories. Like when you go to theater, you're supposed to care. You're supposed to invest in the characters. But I worry that lately, if I were to ask certain writers, they would say, what do I care if you care about my play? I'm just trying to prove this point. This play is not about making people happy. It's about making them think. And so I have to be careful about saying, you know, making that a hard standard or whatever, that you have to care about the characters and you have to care about the story, because there are operatives out there today who do not believe that. And there's all kinds of stories. There's all kinds of plays out there, and we have to, I guess, make room for all of it.
Yeah. Yes, but it was, oh my God. Your TED Talk, Audrey. I love it.
My TED Talk. Lord help me.
Welcome to my world.
Your characters are what's so special. And so like what I'm hearing is that you're working from them. You're working from them as people and what they need and what's happening to them.
It's actually even one level beyond that. I'm actually working, it's going to sound really strange, but I'm actually working for the people that are going to be reading the story or watching the story. I'm writing for them. I care less about the characters than I do about the people that experience the story. And that sounds very strange, but I start with the audience in mind. And I say to myself, when I go to the theater, I want it to feel spiritual. I want it to feel like church. Not like church, but like I want it to feel special, right? And
communal,
say it,
expressive,
Carolyn.
changing, communal, expressive, changing, that kind of a church.
Right. And I know for me that if I go to a theater and it doesn't feel like church, I usually leave, because I don't like I don't like stories that are empty. And so I want to feel something. I want to have like an experience.
Like a catharsis of some sort.
Go.
Oh, I was going to say, I even teach to my very youngest theater students, like 4-year-olds, that your performance is a present. It's a gift that you're giving the audience, and that's where you're always needing to start from, is what is it that you want to give.
Right. And we want to give it to our actors and our directors and our designers and our audience. And so there's no there's why would there be any problem with starting with that as your goal, rather than saying, let me write this play, and if people get it, they get it, and if they don't, they don't. Well,
Although that comes in sometimes.
They what?
Although that does come in sometimes.
Yes, fine. At least I know I did my best.
Right.
Although sometimes I haven't done my best, but that was before. Don't look over there. I want people to get what they came for. And so I write with that as the goal. And I work my way back and I say, that's why I'm allergic to exposition, heavy dialogue, and I use a lot of hypnotic techniques in the work to pull people in, to put them in a suggestive state. That's not unlike watching a sermon.
Right.
You know,
right.
when you go to church and you've got a good pastor and he's up there and you're in it and you're getting emotional and he's really reached you, it's not at all unlike that. It's very similar to that. Pastors are known for using hypnotic techniques.
I can testify just with working on June. It's each time I read it and the more familiar I am with the text, the more that I can just be of service to it. And last night's rehearsal was, I would liken it to church. I felt like I was as complete as possible, given all these circumstances of life, that I was a vessel for her, because the words and the structure took me there.
There's, we could get into specifics, but a lot of that's on my website. Or look in any hypnosis or trance induction, and you'll see the operative things at play there. There's the whole guided imagery scene, which is, that's guided meditation right there. The idea of sorry, my hair keeps getting in my face. I'm trying to get it out of my face. The whole guided imagery scene is designed to get people up to that point. They should be in a sort of a receiving sort of state, because I've opened some loops and left them open and not tried to close everything. The audience needs something to do. They need a puzzle, or they need a question that's not resolved, or they need a snippet of something. Sometimes we call that foreshadowing. They need a snippet of something that's not answered, so that they can track this thing through completion. The brain wants to finish that circle, right? The brain is not really happy unless we get closure. It wants to have closure. And so however long you can keep that circle open, the audience is engaged. Their brains are actually engaged in activated to close these loops. And so that's why over explaining things with exposition it's not exciting for an audience, because you've given them nothing to do. They just need to sit there and listen to you explain things from A to Z. Every little thing is explained. Well, that's why audiences tune out, because you've given them no mischief, no way to play with you.
Yeah.
And or you've added everything out. There's no subtext, there's no mystery, there's no tension. And so that guided imagery scene between June and Wheezy and Alabaster is a really good example. At the point where we get there with them, the audience is already sort of in a suggestive state, because they've just witnessed what came just before. And I won't, no spoilers, but there's a beautiful moment that comes before that. There's hardly any dialogue at all. There's some music playing, and it's a very spiritual moment. So their imaginations and their brains, it's all activated, and they're leaning in. And here comes a moment between Wheezy and June where Wheezy starts asking June to imagine a better way, a better life. And June's like, I can't. And Wheezy's like, well, you have to. So go back to the part where it was really bad, that day where it was really bad, and let's imagine something better. Let's put yourself in a painting. June's a painter. Put
Yeah.
yourself in a painting. And when Wheezy poses the prompt that way, June's like, oh, I can do that. I know how to do that. Okay, I'm in a painting, you know. And so they walk through this exercise, which it doesn't come off as like an exercise to either of them. But we go through this exercise with them. And as an audience member watching that, we're actually going through it with them. Our brain doesn't really effectively know the difference. It's experiencing that along with June and Wheezy, which is, I think, one of the reasons why when people talk about having seen this play, they talk about something that's been pulled loose, or something that was stuck for a long time, or they talk about how it somehow helped them find a connection between grief and letting go, or they all describe it a little bit differently. But so, you know, I didn't write it with all of that in mind. I just used these techniques, and they mean something to people. They can go away and say, I was changed. I went to the theater, and when I left, I felt better. So that's who I'm writing for. Long story short.
But it kind of touching on what you were bringing up a moment ago, Johannah, is and also what you just discussed too, is even with the loops or wanting to close a loop, even in that scene, even towards the end of all of your plays, you leave the tiniest little bit of that loop open so that the audience not only has gone through this journey and had whatever experience is so personal to them, but also they can walk out and one person can have a completely different view about what's happening next than the other person. And so that little loop is still kind of out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that what we just said?
Well, yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Well, there's
always a little bit of a loop that's left.
Well, that's the resolution of the denouement. It's like I like to leave my plays kind of open at the end. And that's a very small detail, but I learned a long time ago, my very first play, ending a play on the nose or ending it with a silly joke, or it's not honest, and life isn't tied up in a bow. So I don't think our plays should be tied up in a bow either. So sometimes I have repetition in my stories, and sometimes I'll pull in a little bit of repetition, which is also a hypnotic technique, and I'll bring it back at the end. The repetition is once something that it's a technique that, and again, I'm not a hypnosis expert, but this is what I do. Repetition helps the audience member feel safe, because they're getting reassurances. It makes them somehow feel closer. And it's also sometimes a little playful game, you know. Like if there's a technique I use, I call it fruit flying. And that's when you give a character a recurring nuisance. You see that in every great satirical work of theater ever, you know, in comedies and farce and all that. You see the or who can forget in A Fish Called Wanda, that poor lady that kept losing a dog every day. She would lose another dog because something would happen, like a piano would fall on. Remember, she was walking all those terriers. She had like four or five of them, and every day she would lose one because of what's his name? Like a piano would fall on one of them, or one of them would get run over by a car. I'm sorry, that's a bit more of a nuisance, but it's this running, you know, this running gag. And Carolyn and I, that's maybe the most fun thing we do as a collaboration, is we
fruit flying.
Yeah, fruit flying.
Fruit flying, I like it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
my son has mastered that. Oh my gosh, I'm glad there's a term for it.
repeating the same
Um,
nuisance over and over again, no matter how many times you tell them to stop. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm just going to go back just a little bit about how you said Wheezy leads June in a guided meditation. I think it's really worth now talking about the fact that Wheezy is a goat.
Yes.
And
there's that.
And like, oh, how do you get there? How do you get to the point where you're like, I know I'm gonna make a play with anthropomorphic-y talking goats who are emotional support animals and kind of bitchy.
You know, it's interesting to me that no matter what you add to a play, it has the potential of being a tiny kernel of something or blossoming into this enormous, powerful, like there's a scene, a transition scene for Bib that in many arguably is maybe the most moving most moving part of the whole play. You have this goat, this mama goat, very old, sick mama goat, and she doesn't have any lines at all in the play. But she gets to this one scene and you can hear a pin drop and people start crying. And yet she doesn't speak. The reason that scene exists is because we were having a scene change issue. And I looked at Jason Parrish and I was like, well, okay, let's go with that. He told me what he wanted to do. And so I went home and I wrote the scene, and it has become like I can't even imagine the play without it now. And yet it was written in response to a problem with the scene change.
And it was also a gift from Sarah, what Sarah Morrissey was doing already early on in the process. There was this,
yes.
yeah, and she was changing that sort of view of Bib.
That's right. That's right. That's an example of how you can create she is just masterclass, created the most indelible rendering of the character of Bib. And it was just astonishing. I will say that I did not start out, if I tell people, if I'd started out with the idea that I was going to have talking goats, I know I would have messed it up, because that's not where I've never done this before. I've never had talking animals. The play started as a two-hander, and there were goats, but they were not speaking goats. They were just like around, you know, and getting kibble. And I thought, well, they could be played by dancers or puppets. And but then when I got to the part of the story where June talks about how Wheezy, who is the main lead talking goat and also the narrator of the play, that Wheezy was somehow the keeper of all of the torment and sadness of this place, this realm, and that she somehow takes the pain away, you know, like a kidney. It occurred to me over the course of the year after its first workshop that if that was going to be the case, then why not have Wheezy assert herself somehow? And so she just kept tapping me on the shoulder like I have something to say, and I was like, you be quiet, you're a goat.
You're a goat.
You're being played by puppets, so knock it off. And then it came time for the next workshop, and I said to Joe Calarco at Signature, I said, we need to pay for another actor. And he goes, why? And I said, well, because Wheezy's been talking to me and I think that she has something to say. And he goes, okay. And luckily they found the money for an extra actor. And I came in the first day with that guided imagery scene written, and that was really her only talking, her own presence in the story was then. And he goes, wow, I see what you're doing. He goes, we need more of her. And I was like, what? He goes, she needs to be all in this. So I went across the street to my hotel room and I wrote all night long, and I put her all over the story, and I made her a narrator, kind of this wise Yoda type. Although at the time I didn't know I had done that. This is what I mean about like, I didn't know she was a Yoda until I could stand back from it and see what I had done, right? But on page 1, she's like, I'm a goat. Hey, I'm Wheezy. I'm a goat. I'm aware that I'm a goat. That's my mom. That's June. We've got a connection. You know, just remember June. Oh, and that's a new person, Alice. Just remember June, you asked her to come. And so halfway through page 1, well, maybe the end of page 1, we know all the rules of the card game. Okay, that's a goat. That's another goat who's sick. That's June. She lives here. Somehow she and Wheezy have a connection. We don't know what that means, but they've got a connection and they can hear each other talk. Okay. The goat has self-awareness, is omniscient, and can talk and back and forth with a human being. And this is the new person. This is a new person. You know all that. And so how great of a technique is that to hit the ground running rather than sneaking in all this exposition, just like straight up, I'm going to show you behind the curtain. Got it? Everybody good? And here we go. I will say
it was also partly because when you did have the real goats, we had that moment where it was the real goats were unreliable, so you couldn't trust.
No, back up, because we started talking about. You're the one that brought in. I was like, could we do goat yoga?
Yeah. Well, during the storm scene, we got into the idea like those little thunder coats like you give to dogs, and so we had this thunder goat coat, which we thought was a riot. So we were totally stuck on thunder goat coat, and then I remember I was doing a show in Birmingham, and you had called, and we went from thunder goat coat to they were trying to do the feeding. They were starting to feed. And they were coming to the window, and that's when we knew they couldn't be real goats for some theater to figure out their angle. And so that evolved into goat yoga, because that was kind of starting to come into vogue, I guess. And you were talking about goat yoga, which also couldn't be a real goat. And so that's when she wound up sitting next to Alice. She wound up sitting next to Alice. I actually kind of feel like that's probably the first thing she said was in that. She was talking to Alice.
But I was imagining in my head that there were people out on in the yard, and there were actual goats climbing on them. And Carolyn says you cannot use real goats because they're not reliable.
Right.
It's true. They're really adorable.
And I feel like Joe Calarco and I had some sort of a, I don't know, psychic connection at one point, because I remember too that it was almost like that same week that we both felt, and you felt, all of us felt that she was much more.
Right.
She was much more.
You guys knew that probably before I did. But you always do that with everything. I will give you like the taste of something, and you'll say, this is way richer. You know, I remember with the Gulf, and there was a whole scene, an argument where I wrote a scene where Betty was complaining about her state in life and how she didn't want to grow up and be like Dolores Petaway. She didn't want to grow up and be a crazy cat lady waiting around to die so no one can notice. And I sent that to you, and you said, don't be hating on the crazy cat lady.
Right.
Like, you think they
got
grow
to
on trees?
respect
You
the
think they
cat
grow
lady.
on trees? And so because Carolyn kept me honest, down and back to George Saunders, like really, really being honest with your characters, Carolyn was like, there's a nobility to the
Yeah.
crazy cat lady, right? In order to become a crazy cat lady, you have to have lived.
Yeah.
You have to have suffered, right?
Right.
And
That's
am I getting
right.
it right, Carolyn? I mean, that's
Yes.
not.
Yes.
And so where there was this idea that this crazy cat lady, Dolores Pettaway, used to drive a race car back years ago, minor league, but she was really, really good at it. And Betty is like, you know, she used to drive a race car. And look at her now. She's got bursitis and she's a crazy cat lady and she's sick and so
And
that you go ahead.
And that takes it back. That takes it back to Wheezy. At one point, which I guess I do this, but at one point, I felt so strongly that Wheezy was more than a goat, a talking goat, and I felt as though it was almost like a spirit guide. And I started looking up all of these different things about what goats are in Native Americans, and what goats are with voodoo, what goats are in the South, what goats do, what's goat behavior, and sort of taking it to this broader spiritual level. I think she's divine. I think she's
Can you talk
divine,
more about
but
that?
I also think she's divine. And we were talking about that when we were about to do
Yeah.
the reading in New York. Was that came up with when we were talking with Eleanor? Is how
It's
So that's
unbelievable to me that, like, you didn't say, I'm going to write a play where a person who has experienced major trauma has a service animal and it is a goat. And like,
well, I didn't see her as a service animal at first. We just saw
I
her
still
as a
don't see her.
But-
Yeah, I still
but,
don't
like,
see her as a service animal.
as someone, so part of why I picked that out is like, that's part of my life. My dad picked out a shelter dog who has become his service animal and who like went from being able to have his own dog joys and this and that to now he puts himself at the foot of my dad's ladder to catch his fall, you know?
Oh.
And like when I read Wheezy and Wheezy saying like, I've done it, but I gotta go now. That like, yes, this noble creature has given all that she should ever have to give.
But see, that's the beauty of Wheezy, is that she's not one thing.
Yeah.
She's by degrees a service animal. When June is going through a PTSD episode, she's like, all right, hey, it's just a word, chill. She's also like a big brother. There's times when she's like busting June's balls and it's nothing to do with PTSD.
Yeah.
She's also a caretaker for her mother. She's also the wise mentor that you have in like the hero's journey, you know, like Yoda or Gandalf or Mr. Miyagi, right? They teach the young grasshopper what they need to do the hard thing. But I actually think of, this is going to sound weird, I have always thought of Wheezy as just human. I wrote her as human. And I know that certain directors can't think of her as human, like they think of her as a construct of June's imagination.
Yeah.
But I can't think of her as anything other than like a human being, you know, that June has in her life that she relies on. And ultimately, I think that Wheezy has enabled her. And so when Wheezy says to her, I'm out, to me, that's no different than, you know, someone who's dealing with a family member who's an addict, or the last moment of August Osage County. You know, all I'm doing here is wasting my time because you're not acting right. And there's nothing that I can do that's going to get you to act right and get out of this house and get off these drugs. And I'm speaking.
Yeah.
So I must need to just leave, and she can't leave until Bib does the hard thing. I'm not going to spoil it, but that sets off the domino effect. She's like, when this happens, I'm going to do this. And so ultimately June is put in a box because she knows that if she doesn't do the hard thing, that she will be alone, probably indefinitely alone.
I've always kind of likened it to that. The being in contact, Jodie Foster movie, Carl Sagan.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The being in contact, where Wheezy is, she is divine. She is all knowing. She is all the Miyagi, all the Yoda, all of that. And it's almost as if, look, you can't handle what I'm about to lay down on you. You can't handle what's all is going on. I'm going to take all that on me. I'm going to take all of this pain from you because I can, and I'm going to present myself in a way that you can handle it. You can even feel better about yourself about it. You can, in some ways, be superior over it. You can rule it. You can care for it. I'm going to lay it down here, and the way that you can handle it is I'm a goat.
Yeah.
Here I am.
A little bit of a different way sometimes. This is my end when you talk about that, is if the face of God were to appear, if God were to appear on earth or on land, like his expansiveness is too much for the human being to comprehend. So what would that equal? What is a safe thing? You know,
your familiar pet goat who lived on your farm.
We've seen it in countless movies and stories, right? That divine element personified and or anthropomorphized, whatever, into a rock, even a tree, you know, a bird. That's nothing new. And I think I just accidentally like landed on that because this isn't my wheelhouse, writing magical realism or poetic realism or whatever. I hadn't really done this before. It just was like, well, Wheezy's talking to me. I don't know. She's talking to me. And I know when people hear, oh, you have a talking goat, is this a kid's play? You know, to me, she just doesn't feel like a goat. She feels, to me, when she leaves, it feels like June is losing her brother or her grandmother, or, you know, like it should feel that important. When Wheezy leaves, it should really, really hurt. And so I think the successful rendering of this play accounts for all of the myriad things that Wheezy is, to get the most out of the rendering. She's not just one thing. She's not just a Yoda. She's not just a goat. She's not just a daughter and a caretaker. And, you know, she's all these things. And she has suffered all of the pain that June has experienced in this realm that knows only, you know, what does she say? Everything dies here. This is not a happy farm. That's on page 1. This is not a happy farm.
Yeah.
This place destroys people, right? And so all the pain that June has experienced as a result of this tornado and the subsequent PTSD, Wheezy has experienced it too. You know, they've gone through this together. And in fact, Wheezy was alone all those months when June was in rehab. Wheezy was just making her way all alone on the farm. So I ache for Wheezy, in that I want the world to understand that she's not just a goat, that she suffers. And the articles that I see sometimes where they talk about where they don't just say, you know, Wheezy, you know, June and Alice are suffering. Well, so are Wheezy and Bib.
Yeah.
There's 4 of them. There's 4 creatures on this farm, and they're all going through hell. Yeah. But what's funny, I do have to tell you this one funny story. I can't leave this out. Originally, of course, the story was a 2-hander. It just had June and Alice. And I sent it around to festivals and competitions. And of course, you know, playwriting moves at the most excruciating glacial pace. I'm not sure that there's anything that's slower than response time for plays and inquiries and things. I got a call from Marin Theater Company, and I'm sitting in my office, and I'm told that I'm on speakerphone, and there's 3 people in the room in California, in the Bay Area, and they're calling me to tell me that Alabaster has won the Colicchio Prize, which is something I've been chasing for a long time now. And it's a national prize for an emerging writer. And they just loved it. They said it keeps surprising us, and I was like, in the version that you have,
I remember now. I know what's coming now.
Are there talking goats? And I hear this little tiny voice in the void, and it was a woman's voice, and she goes, no. Like, what has this woman done? She's like written in talking livestock now. What has she done to her play? But, you know, after I took that risk at that workshop and I wrote in the character of Wheezy and we had the talk back, everyone was like, oh, she's my favorite character. Oh, no, you can't have the story without Wheezy. Like,
yeah, I can't imagine.
You can write something overnight that automatically gives the viewers like veto power, because if you were to take her back out, people would revolt. That's how beloved Wheezy is.
Yeah,
she's not just there for comic relief. Like this is the way that we fall in love with Yoda. You know, it's the way you feel about Yoda. It's like nobody ever questions Yoda. I don't know why people are questioning Wheezy. It's no different. You love them.
When so Laurel, who is actually playing Wheezy in our reading, she's WTF's submissions manager, and Jessica, who's playing Bib, happens to be her like top volunteer reader, and the two of them often are the ones who pull the like ding 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 scripts that get submitted. And so Jessica had read Alabaster first, which you submitted to us, and then handed it to Laurel, and then Laurel sent it to me, and she's like, this play's great, dibs on Wheezy.
Yep.
And I mean,
I get that a lot. Sometimes it's June, but it's usually Wheezy, because the thing about Wheezy, that character, well, both her and Bib really, but both of those characters, you know, and this is something that Carolyn has really been big on, I mean, reminding me of, is that Alabaster is a play where you can include any woman, any size, any shape, any age. There's a role for them in this play.
Yep.
Unless maybe you're like 19.
Yeah.
June has to at least be, you know, mid-20s, at least.
And when I read it, I was like, oh gosh, we got to do this play before I'm too old for June. I got to do it.
Well, and the great news is there's 2 other characters you can play when you're done playing June.
Exactly.
It's a miracle, I think, that there's 4 incredible roles in this piece for women, and it didn't start out that way. And I, you know, Carolyn, she's very outspoken about it, way more than me, you know, that we need more people out there, men and women, writing roles for
Age and stage. Age
Say it
and
again?
stage.
Age and stage.
Age and stage, yeah.
Do you want to expound on that?
Well, I mean, you know, I give it to you enough.
Right,
Sometimes
what do you mean age and stage? What is your primary beef?
What, I'm sorry?
What's your primary beef with plays today?
Well, I just think that so much of the time, it's not just with plays. I think it's with a lot of things, with society. Heck, look at what we're dealing with the elderly right now. But everybody gets kind of tossed aside, You can hear all sorts of huge Hollywood stars talking about getting tossed aside. And what are they doing? They're going out and they're self-producing, or they're getting together. You got the Meryl Streeps with the Demise, with the, you know, Holly Hunters, with the doing their thing so that they're still viable. And I just think it's really important that we don't forget that. I think Lisa Langford started writing because she wanted to write plays that she could do, because there weren't plays she could do. You write, and I always sort of give you a hard time about it, I know, but I think so many of the injured, the scarred, the lost, the in need, your characters, I've said this before, they have scars older than 25. Their scars are older than 25.
Right.
You know, I mean, they're just, you have to have a certain amount of life lived in order to get as deep as things need to go. I think, Johanna, you said that the more you read this play, the more you know it, the more you think it's coming to life for you, the closer you get. I've always said that there are different stages. When you read an Audrey play, it's one thing. When you hear an Audrey play, it's another. When you do an Audrey play, it's another. But it's like you're constantly peeling out that, you know, onion, or getting down to that chewy Tootsie Pop center. And there's so much more to mine. There's still more to mine. There's never, you know, you're never at the bottom or all the way there. There's just so much to do. And I think that it takes a certain life experience in order to really even know what that means. There's a difference in Maytag Virgin. There's a difference in Maytag Virgin being played. I love that everybody's playing it. I think it's wonderful. Everybody do Audrey's plays. But
yes,
there's a difference in the 25, 30-year-old playing Lizzie and her loss and dealing with, you know, finding love again and having all of these questions, and the 40, 50-year-old Lizzie who's out there on her own going, hey, now, how about that? You're looking at me? So there's a totally different ball game, and I think it's important for people to remember to write for people of age and stage, just as people from all walks of life and shapes and sizes and colors.
Welcome to the Women's Theater Festival, Carolyn. We're here to recruit you.
Unfortunately, I think playwrights need to remember that eventually, if your play is producible, it's gonna land in the lap of a casting director, and your casting director will say, what is the age range? And you're like, well, consider all ages. And they go, you're going to need to narrow that down for me. Or you'll get a note that says, why don't you pick a Hollywood actor that reminds you of this character? How can I possibly do that? This character can be done by someone who's 59, 29. How can I possibly, but you're going to get that. And so I always put a note in my plays at the beginning that, you know, my characters are written for all kinds of women, you know, and to look beyond just the obvious. You know, Alabaster has several characters that would be perfect for a disabled actor, you know, a hearing impaired actor, a sensory challenged actor. And I'm looking for those opportunities. I'm trying to, I've actually sent out emails, trying to collaborate with theaters that want roles for, you know, for the actors that they work with. And so anyway, that's a challenge. I would tell writers today, you know, put a note in your script to encourage your casting people to look beyond the obvious, you know, and if, like, at one point there was a note in Alabaster that, you know, June's sister was a certain age, and Carolyn was like, take it out. That's the only thing keeping this character from being ageless, you know. Open. But if you say that she has to have a 7-year-old sister, or that her sister was X age when this happened, then you're automatically limiting the women that can play this role. And I thought that was fantastic advice.
Yes.
We changed it, you know.
But Audrey, I think that's something that's really special about you, is that from the first conversation you and I had, you you are generous about the characters, and you're like, okay, which one do you want to play? Which woman do you want to be? And that you embrace all people, trying them on and trying to become them. And it's so special. I just need you to know that that's special, and that you're special, and that you
can give a lot of that credit to Carolyn, because she's kept me on my toes, and she's kept me honest, and she's kept me thinking about things that are more important than the text itself. And that's what I mean when I say that I'm writing for the people that are involved in the stories and coming to see the stories. That's what I really mean by that, is that to truly be inclusive, you have to get over your own agenda. You have to get past your own intentionality, and you have to think beyond whatever message or intentionality you might have shown up with, and say, no, fuck it. I want a vehicle that is flexible, that works. And by the by, for writers that want to get produced, make your play producible. If you think she has to be 25 years old, then you've already, or you put 15 characters in your play, you're already giving producers a reason to say no. Make it, open it up the best that you can, so that it has more opportunities to get picked up, And that's the reason I wrote two-handers for years, because you can do a two-hander anywhere, even if you're an unknown playwright.
This from the woman who put a boat and now 2 goats in her plays and said they'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out.
I'm going to give Joe, I'm going to botch his last name. Joe, I love you. Joe, I pronounce it Musumeci. He's a gifted designer. And I messaged him and I was like, tell me I'm insane. I was like, if I put goats in this play, is that going to make it unproducible? And Joe goes, fuck no. Producers live for that shit. And he was right, because I have heard from a lot of people, one of the reasons that they chose this play was because it presented amazing opportunities for designers. There's June's, she's covered in scars. There's the scars. There's the tornado that blows through. There's the goats, what to do about the goats. There's the photographs. The script says that there are, that the stage comes to life, whether you use projections or not. It's not required that you use projections, but a lot of them do. So
wall-to-wall exceptional folk art.
Say it again. Yes.
All the art pieces.
I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, and yet 11 theaters signed on for this craziness.
So yes, okay. We're close out of time, but that's the part I want to make sure to cover, is your relationship to your success. And to in our WTF audience, we've been talking a lot about New Play Network and New Play Exchange and everything. But so for this audience to know that, like, you achieved an 11 city rolling world premiere.
Yeah.
11 theaters said, yeah, we're going to produce it this year.
Yeah.
And you won the David Colicchio Prize. And you're number 3 on the 2019 Kilroy's list. And those plays get listed in the order of how many recommendations they get.
I'm gonna push back on that. I know they used to be. I'm not entirely sure they were.
Let's pretend
in order.
Okay.
But when
did a lot to raise the visibility of the play.
When Laurel handed me the script, I'm like, oh, that's number 3 on the Kilroy's list.
I'm not gonna take I refuse to take the number 3 spot. But
no, we'll only have one.
Just means my married name is the reason I'm number 3. But I would like to say thank you to the Kilroys for listing it, because even having won the Colicchio and even having won the Rolling World premiere, the Kilroys is perhaps the most referenced. Hold on, I don't want my phone to die. The most referenced when people are looking to do plays by women. They go right there. Hold on. Okay. But Did I lose you?
No, we hear you. You're a little
Hold on.
bit frozen, but keep going.
Hold on, I'm coming back to you. Here we go. Did I come back?
No,
Did I come back?
There you are.
frozen.
I'm still frozen. All right, hold on.
You're frozen.
I don't know what I did.
But you look
look
like a
intent.
badass.
You do.
No, I don't
actually.
like that picture of me, not at all. Hold on.
You know what's exciting? I'm going to talk while she's doing that. You know what's exciting is that when we were out for the NMPN showcase in Sacramento, and we were going through the pitch as it is, and at one point I looked at Jason Parrish and I said, "Oh, we're just gonna, we're gonna obliterate them. We're about to just sell this thing like you can't believe." I felt like a car salesman. And Audrey said, "Oh, it's not a competition." And I said, "Oh, yes, it is." And Jay Parrish said, "Oh, yes, it is." And he pushed it, and we worked it. And the more that we pushed, and the more people that read it, and the more people that were exposed to it, it just snowballed, because people just get so invested in Alabaster that it's unreal. I mean, I'm invested in all of her plays, but the way that people have latched on to Alabaster, and the way that these women and these goats have touched women, goats, people,
Right.
everyone is pretty exciting. So my competitive spirit comes out on that. I think it's
another playwright that we have been talking with recently, Donna Hoke, mentioned that she was there. She saw that showcase and that it was just dynamite, and that a lot of how these Rolling World premieres get going has to do with the quality of that moment. And so, Carolyn, you were there. So how did y'all do that? How did you help position this play to be ready to gather all those rosebuds?
Well, don't forget all the preparation, because she and I have shown up to moments of truth like this, and we're really big on preparation. And so a lot of it is, prologue preparation. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Yeah, well, there is that. I think we were so fortunate. The women that were part of that, part of the reading, the actors that were part of the reading, were incredible. Knew each other. Were part of that the Studio B company, B Street Theater Company, and they knew each other well. So they walked in with a great relationship. There was like depth happening between Wheezy and June just from the get-go. I think too that Jay Parrish had this. Man, Jay Parrish can run a reading like nobody's business. I mean, I'm a perfectionist, and I'm over there worrying about all these different details, and Jay's already taken care of it. I mean, it was just really exciting.
Because as you know, Alabaster is very dense, and we always run out of time. Keep going.
And so one of the ways that we didn't run out of time was I pretty much kept my mouth shut. And we would powwow every day after the rehearsal, or in these in-betweens with the rehearsals. Me and Jay and Audrey would powwow and go back in, and he could work very specifically. And then he'd send me off. He sent me off at one point to tell stories to some of the girls, because he wanted them to hear my voice. And he wanted them to get a vibe of where we were from, and tell some stories that became part of Alabaster. And so I think that was really important.
Already directed a work. It helped that Jay had already been part of a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And that he knew the play.
Yeah. I'm fascinated about that as a director, and how you get good at that. Like, that seems like a good skill for directors to start honing.
Well, when you've only got 10 hours to do a reading, and because Alabaster is so layered, you could spend so much time. There's just so much to it. And so the idea is, well, what is the most important thing at this moment? And sometimes the most important thing is, hey, you two, when you get to this moment, turn your music stand so you're facing each other. That's not sexy, but it demystifies a moment that otherwise would have been, wait, what are they doing? Because you're in a room with 300 people,
Yeah.
You all want them to make sure that they have that visual. Well, that's not
Yeah.
something they necessarily would have done on stage, but in a reading, you want them to know what you want them to know that one of them is being interviewed by the other. So the things that you're triaging are more about like, just read half of this stage direction, or don't read that stage direction there. Wait until after the scuffle, because it completely steals the energy from this moment.
Mhm,
So let's
mhm.
wait until after, or let's truncate this whole stage direction instead of she takes a picture, to just a picture, she's taking pictures. So sometimes, and sometimes the biggest part of it is working with the person reading the stage directions to help paint that picture emotionally, getting that getting that person in the same, like when she's describing the thunderstorm scene, really getting into it so that we could feel the tension along with her, because that's all we really have.
Yeah.
So that was a
And-
big part of it.
And we're kind of doing that too, like figuring out how to do that, the version of that with our boxes and our tiny cameras. And Rachel's been amazing for that, for wanting to like craft that and be like, okay, well, given these circumstances and the amount of time we have, let's do it this way. And it's going to be so special.
Yeah.
So, okay. So someone does have a question about how you define a dramaturg. And then I definitely want to hear like how you deal with being successful, because it's very hard. And I think it's something that's very woman hard. Like I'm struggling with it. So give me all the advice, and how to like, hold your space and own your accomplishments.
Okay. Did someone have a question or?
Yeah. Defining dramaturg.
Oh. I never knew I was. Audrey and I have been jamming since we were like way back in the dark ages. And I always thought that was what it was. I mean, I didn't even know it was dramaturgy. I just thought it was us staying up all night and then me going and doing a lot of research. And then one day Audrey said, now that you're my dramaturg, you've been my dramaturg for so long. You're so good at dramaturgy. And I went, I'm going to go look that up. So, it's kind of one of those things. It just kind of happened for me, but for you, Aud, how do you describe it?
I see, again, I think I'm kind of naive because I'm not a trained playwright. I don't have an MFA. I call Carolyn my dramaturg because she has exquisite taste. She is incredibly conscientious. She knows every syllable of everything that I have ever written and doesn't like some of it. That's important. And openly, actively doesn't like parts of it. In fact, there are parts of some of my stories and plays that she despises to this day. That's important. I don't want a yes man. I want somebody who's going to call me on my shit and say, this is new territory for you and I think it's great, or this is, you've already done this, or this could elevate it to something else. Like if I hadn't talked to her about Crazy Cat Ladies, I wouldn't have had one of the best moments in that entire script, which is Kendra standing up and saying, you think crazy cat ladies grow on trees? That's like Eagle Scouts, man. That's like Mount Everest with a flag and shit, So because she disagrees with me on things, I'm a better writer. And that's just any person that you have in your life that is going to tell you like it is, who understands your aesthetic to begin with, and has, how do I say this? I have lots of people that give me feedback on my stories, and I go to them for specific reasons. Like, I'm not going to go to Andy Bronstein for, like, he's a very funny guy, but I don't go to him to like show me the comedy. I go to him because he's really good at looking at the characters and showing me where it's a little thin, And I go to my friend Michael because he understands every syllable. He's very familiar with all my stories, and he'll make sure that the syntax is just right, or if I've missed a detail or spelled something wrong. I go to Katie for the same reason. I go to Carolyn because she's like my main collaborator, and she and I both are from Alabama. She knows so much about Alabama history, and I'm writing about Alabama, not entirely, but 4 or 5 big plays now, all set in Alabama. And so if I was writing something classical like Shakespeare, I probably wouldn't go to Carolyn. I'd find someone someone who's classically, if I want to know how to make the perfect split pea casserole, if something exists, I don't know, like Carolyn is going to make sure that the details are there. And she also, and this is important, she also knows comedy. And that's really important. Jay Parrish is really good with it too. Like there were moments in Alabaster where we would flip a word or leave a sentence out, because what he knows about the rhythm of comedy, having done so much of it as an actor and a performer, he knows the rhythm of comedy, and so does Carolyn. And so like I'll get it partway there, and you know, Carolyn will say, add one more, you know, like the rhythm of threes or the rhythm of irony, you know. And so I keep her around as my dramaturg because of all those things. And I would assume that most people choose their dramaturg, you know, for the same reason. What I don't want is a dramaturg who doesn't understand my aesthetic or why it is that I write, like who I'm really writing for, and is all in the clouds or, you know, lost in the aesthetic of the beauty. And I really need like boots on the ground, gritty kind of writing. I can handle the lyricism. I don't really need a whole lot with that. A lot of writers are really good with lyricism, almost to a fault. And what they really need is to pull back on that and use it for good and not evil, you know.
So like,
that's when I think of a dramaturg. There have been many times I've brought her in the rehearsal room, and she's been a wonderful conduit because she understands the Southern dialect like no one I've ever known. And she has done remote dramaturging with About Face in Chicago. Who else, Carolyn? Who's the other theater?
A couple of the Rolling World premieres.
Some she just knows to play. Really, she knows Alabaster better than I do, and and I can't be everywhere at once, and so she's been helping with that. But yeah, just somebody who can explain the material too. That they need that in the rehearsal room, you know.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, I'm going to summarize a little bit that like in defining a dramaturg, you want someone that pushes you to be rigorous, who gives you that, who is rigorous with you and so forth. And then who can then represent you and represent the work because they know it so well and they know it so well.
And they're also and I've gotten really lucky with Carolyn in that the things that she cares about as a human being are really, really important things. And I'm not just talking about recycling. I'm not just talking about like save the manatee. I'm talking about the ache of in humans, and especially as they get further along in life and they're just besieged and bombarded with disappointment and disillusionment and losing their youth, and I call it beat down by like the savage blows of life. Like, We all feel that way, especially the older we get. Like, have we run out of chances? Am I ever going to get it back? Whatever it is, you know, am I unlovable? Am I undesirable? And that's just part of it. But what Carolyn really understands is, you know, how hard it is, especially being a woman, right? How hard it is, and the kinds of messaging, however hidden or oblique or whatever, that we need. We need stories of hope and redemption. Why do you think we're so in love with love stories? You know, the idea that we're unsuitable or unlovable or we're past our prime or that we've run out of chances, to me, that's all a big lie. Just like saying Dolores Petaway used to be a race car driver. Well, now she's just sick. And Kendra goes, you want to squabble over the order of it? Why does the order of it matter? Why is it any less? Why is she any less? You know, you call her a cat lady, but why is she any less of a success? Because she had success early in life. Who made that rule? And this is the kind of thing that Carolyn and I talk endlessly about, is the silliness.
As you can see.
Say it again, Carolyn?
I said, as you can see.
Lauren's going to pop back in and wrap us up in just 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Audrey, tell us about your
say that
success quickly
statement,
before
Audrey.
she pops in.
What do I want to say? What?
I want you to tell me how you deal with being successful.
Am I successful though? No.
I know we've been avoiding the question. We're like June.
Very strange. Like, I think a lot of my playwright colleagues are successful. Like, if you're getting your stuff done and you're telling the stories that you really want to tell. When I go to theaters around the country, they say they worry, like, you know, we just want to do right by you, Audrey. We just want to. And I was like, you know, what I consider a success is, have we experienced joy working together? If we're in a room together, have we had catharsis here? Is working on the material made us better, happier, more at peace with ourselves, or at least finding a way through, which is why I write the stories that I write, you know? And so that's how I define success. It's not about the money or the visibility, although the visibility doesn't hurt. I'm not going to say that it doesn't hurt. And I will say the weird side of it is people talk differently. I hear people saying, oh, I'd be honored. And I still feel like Jenny from the block. Like, I'm not, I'm still, if you saw my house, like, seriously. And yes, I'm a single mom and have been for, you know, 5 years now. And that, you know, I love my kid, but it's not fun being alone. And a lot of playwriting is being alone. So I will say that it's a mixed bag, especially for someone like me who's kind of reclusive and I, you know, I'm contractually sort of required to get on airplanes. Like, that's not fun. Being there is fun. But I still, Carolyn will attest to the fact that I cried myself to sleep in more than one Soho hotel room. Left the party early. Anyway, it's a good question. Maybe we should talk about that more sometime.
Oh, like tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, okay.
Take it
Same
away.
time, different channel. It's
yeah.
Audrey, yes, you've brought me so much joy these past few weeks. I can't even possibly put it into words yet, what it has meant to connect with you, to make art with you, to make plans with you, to make manifestos with you.
Oh yes, that's right, manifestos.
We have a manifesto coming.
That's right. She and I are offline. Sounds way sexier than it is. But yes, offlining. We have plans to change the world.
Look out, theater.
That's right.
And it all started with the Women's Theater Festival.
That's right. That's right. I'm so glad we could include Carolyn tonight.
Me too.
So she explains things. I've always told her, no, you do it. You explain it, because she has a different. She has better recall than I do of how things went down.
Audrey, the people that are coming into my life because of you too is pretty astonishing.
Really? Oh, well, good.
You're my Wheezy.
Yay!
Aw, aw.
The world needs more Wheezies, for sure.
Yeah, we all.
Yeah.
So Johannah, can you tell people who tuned in late where they can find you guys tomorrow night?
Yes. Hey, everybody, tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. You can find us on twitch.tv/W Theater Festival NC. And at 7:30, we will magically begin performing the play Alabaster for you. And then afterwards, Audrey, maybe Carolyn, Rachel, and the cast, we will pop on and do a talk back with you. So you can bring all these things you've heard tonight, experience the play for yourself, and then we'll answer your questions and dive deeper in.
Tear it up.
I love this. I feel like it's been a master class in playwriting.
Well, it's how we work. I don't know if other people, but if you like watching the sausage being made, come on by.
It's delicious sausage.
Where that came from.
Well, this was lovely. Thank you all for this. This was amazing. Thank you, Johannah, for doing this and hosting a 2-on-1. It's been a different.
Yeah.
So tomorrow we are taking another field trip to the West End, and we are going to chat with Paul Hutton. Mike McGee will be chatting with Paul Hutton, who is in the UK tour of Billy Elliot, and among other things. He's got a very impressive long resume. And so we'll be with him at 4 p.m. right here on Facebook Live. And then at 7 p.m., I will be with Aaron Simon Gross, who was in the original cast of the show 13, I want to say, but he is also directing Edges at North Carolina Theater. So I'm excited about both those events tomorrow as well. So thank you guys. This was awesome.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. I had a blast.
We'll see everyone tomorrow. And for those of you who tuned in late, this will live on the RDU on Stage Facebook page. And sometime in the morning, it will be on the website as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great talking with y'all.
All right.
Best break legs tomorrow night, all of you.
Thank you.
Tear it up.
Thank you.
Bye.
Night. Take care.
Night.
Now I have to figure out how to turn us off.
Oh, it'll turn you off. But Carolyn,
hey, tear it up, girl. Tear it up now. I'm so excited.
What a delight. Will you maybe join